Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first WiT Live event. We're starting a quarterly series of live conversations with external speakers to tackle some of the challenges we face as women in technology. Our hope is that together we can solve some of these challenges and issues for our firm and for everyone. Today, we're featuring Allyship in action. I'm Mitra Best, lead partner for strategic innovation and technology at PwC, and also the co-leader of our Women in Tech platform. I'm joined today by Andrea Fishman, my co-lead in Women in Tech, to introduce the session on allyship. Allyship is a mechanism by which individuals can use their position and privilege to help inclusion and equity in the workplace. As a woman technologist, my journey, the 20 plus years, has been fraught with challenges. However, due to the help of the allies who believed in me and helped me level the playing field, I was able to become a partner, become a leader, and have a vibrant, successful career. Allyship is putting yourself in the shoes of others who are not experiencing an inclusive and equitable environment in their workplace, is to think about using your position and your privilege to help somebody who doesn't benefit from that privilege. It's to be an upstander and not a bystander. So to stand up for people who may not be seen, whose voices may not be heard. Allies can help by their supportive personal relationships or by public sponsorship and advocacy. I am super psyched for our session today and will now pass the mic to Andrea to introduce it. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mitra, for the warm introduction. As mentioned, Karen today is going to be talking about allyship. And allyship is really about taking someone who has privilege and using that to uplift someone else. And it's important not just to be an ally, but to seek out allies in your own career. And it's really a two-way street. I recently came back from 2 years in Japan, where I was a minority in many different ways. I didn't speak the language. I was one of few female partners, and I didn't understand the cultural norms. And so even though I was more senior than most of my team, I needed a variety of allies to help me be successful and our team to be successful there, to help me break through barriers around language, to help gain sponsorship with my clients, and to help me understand how the internal workings of our firm really worked. And so I really learned a lot from seeking out allies, which was a different role for me than being an ally in the past. And so I thought that was a really interesting lens to reflect on as we think about our allyship here within the firm. So I'd now like to introduce you to Joel. Joel's a senior manager in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, who's really championing our allyship initiative and defining what allyship means across our inclusion networks. I really look forward to the conversation with Joel and Karen. So Joel, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitra, and thank you, Andrea, for such a warm introduction. And great day to all of you. I am Joel Howell, as Andrea mentioned, a senior manager in our Office of Diversity, and I am excited to be with you today. The things that bring fulfillment to me is anytime that I'm doing something in purpose and on purpose. And today is one of those days where I'm actually happy to talk about this topic of allyship, because it really is around having these leadership skills that make us more inclusive leaders. And anytime that I'm doing things with teams to help them make them more collaborative and more inclusive, those are the things that bring meaning and fulfillment to my life. So I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today, and a special thanks to our guest, acclaimed leadership coach and author and speaker, Karen Catlin. So just a few things about Karen. The one thing I love about her bio is she coaches women to be stronger leaders and men to be better allies. And you notice I said earlier she's an author, so she's actually the author of 3, not just 1, but 3 books. One is Better Allies, Everyday Actions to Create Inclusive, Engaging Workplaces. She also published the companion book, The Better Allies, so that's the approach to hiring, and then with best practices in there to hire and recruit people. And then she actually has a little book around presentations and tips on that as well, too. So without further ado, I want to welcome Karen Catlin. Karen, welcome.
Joel, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome to everyone who's joining us today.
Well, it is an honor to have you here with us, and I know we have like less than an hour, so I want to just dive into our conversation because I know everyone is hungry to learn more about allyship. When I think about the journey that we've been on with the firm, we, sprinkled allyship here and there, but most recently, we've become very intentional about allyship, and not just the word, but putting it into action. And so I know Mitra and Andrea talked about our firm-wide definition of how we look at allyship, and it's being able to use or give of your power and privilege to advocate for and to support those who are in less advantaged positions. So I'm curious, Karen, how did you just give us a little information about you? How did you get here? I mean, when reading your bio, and I don't want to give the teaser away, but I know you have a tech background, so you can just fill us in on how did you get to this place and where we are today?
Yeah, so sort of the backstory of how we got to where we are today. Sure. So I worked in tech for 25 years. I started out writing code for a living, and over time, I moved into leadership roles. And most recently, I was a vice president of engineering at Adobe. And during the 25 years I spent working in tech, I saw firsthand a decline happening in gender diversity. There used to be a lot more women writing code side by side with me when I started my career, and less so as time progressed. So while I was still at Adobe as the most senior woman on the engineering side, I felt like I had a role to play to advocate for women and make sure they felt that they had, opportunities to grow their careers. So I started our employee resource group for women. I started mentoring a lot of women. And over time, I loved doing all that advocacy work so much, and less so my VP of engineering work. And so about 8 years ago, I started my leadership coaching practice where I could focus on helping women, regardless of where they were working or what role they were working in, but help women throughout tech grow their careers. Now, Joel, here's the thing, though. I love leadership coaching, and I love the clients I get to work with. But I realized soon on that I had a big problem. And the big problem was that all of my clients were working in tech companies where the closer you get to the C-suite, to the CEO, just the maler and paler it got. And with all due respect to anyone who's listening today who's male or pale, that's just what the demographics reveal, right? And so I realized to truly help my clients, I needed to make all of tech more inclusive. Kind of a big mission to embark on. I'm just one person here. But what's the first thing anyone does these days when they want to change the world? They start a Twitter handle. So I started a Twitter handle, it's 6 years ago now, a Twitter handle called @BetterAllies. And my goal with this Twitter handle was to share simple, everyday actions anyone could take to be a better ally, to be more inclusive. Things like, I will notice when an interruption happens in a meeting and redirect the conversation with a simple, I'd like to hear Joel finish his thought. Mm-hmm. And I should emphasize too, I started working on all of this based on gender. I wanted to support women and non-binary individuals, but I soon realized I needed to expand my focus to be looking out and recommending actions to take to support anyone from an underrepresented group based on their gender, race or ethnicity, sexual orientation and identity, age, abilities, and so forth. So anyway, I'm just tweeting a couple times a day as I see things in the news or I read research. And then I started getting speaking engagements. And by the way, this was an anonymous Twitter handle. So people would reach out and say, hey, does anyone from the Better Allies Initiative do any public speaking? And I would get that message and I'd be like, the Better Allies Initiative, really, it's just me. And I'm not even doing this full time. And because I wanted to stay anonymous, I would simply reply like, yes, one of our contributors does some public speaking. We'll put you in touch with her. And then I go over to my personal Twitter account, get in touch with them and say, hey, I'm Karen Catlin. I contribute to Better Allies, love public speaking. What do you have in mind? So I started speaking. And every time I gave a talk about this simple everyday action approach, the things you can do to be more inclusive, every time someone would ask, hey, Karen, do you have a book? Because we want more of this. This wasn't enough. And for a few years, I kept saying, no, I don't have a book. I don't have a book. But I did finally write my book. And as you mentioned in that just lovely intro, thank you, I have written 2 books on the topic now about how to be better allies. Anyway, and so that's the backstory. That's how we have come to meet each other and to be offering this event today.
Wow. Well, no, thank you for that background. And, I'll put a plug in there for the book because I've read it. It is simple. It is engaging. Won't give all the good things away, but I understand your husband was in tech and you there was one story in there about going after kind of the same job. So I won't give the spoiler alert away. They'll have to go in and read that and figure out, what the ending is on that one. But, and it's amazing how I see, you found your calling, but then your calling also found you in, trying to remain anonymous. And then here it is, you're changing the world. And, when it's things like this that are making an impact in the everyday lives of individuals, you can't stay hidden. And thank you for accepting that. So, I want to go into, a word when we think about allyship, and it's the P word that you talk about in your book, this word of privilege. And so when I think about, privilege, as I've been doing my research around allyship, and as I think about it in work, as I even think about it as a parent trying to explain to my kids around privilege, it's really those things around privilege and allyship that seem to go hand in hand. And in your book, you write, it says, I'm just going to read an excerpt from it. It says, privilege doesn't mean your life is easy or that you didn't work hard. It simply means that you don't have to face the obstacles others have had to endure. So help us understand and unpack this. Why is it important for allies to understand their privilege in active allyship?
Yes. And yes, it's so important to understand it. And what you just read from my book is a key thing. I think most of us, when we have our privilege pointed out to us, the initial reaction is to get defensive because it sounds like you didn't have to work hard to where you got to today, or you've had it easy your whole life, or maybe you've had a big trust fund backing you up that has allowed you to do certain things. And really, privilege is simply a set of unearned benefits that you get because you're part of a certain group, a group based on your gender, definitely. And that's what I was originally thinking is it's the white men in tech who have all this privilege. But as I did more research, I realized that privilege is multifaceted and intersectional. And in terms of there's so many ways we can have privilege, such as we have privilege if we have money in the bank and we're not just living paycheck to paycheck. That privilege allows us to say, yeah, I'm up for going out for drinks after work, or yes, sign me up for that, fun, whitewater rafting adventure on a Saturday with the rest of the team that maybe isn't company sponsored, but some people are getting it together, right? That gives you privilege to do that kind of outreach networking, and that leads to professional opportunity. So there's so many ways that people can have privilege. Another one is if you are working in the United States and you have a green card or you have citizenship. That gives you privilege because you're more willing to take some risks with your career. Whereas if you are on a company-sponsored visa, you might be a little bit more risk averse and sort of stay behind the scenes and not take, risk that might impact your employment at that firm. So it's so multifaceted. And in the book, I have a list of 50 ways you might have more privilege than your coworkers. In fact, it's available as a free download on my website, betterallies.com. Maybe that can be included in some sort of post-event communication.
But
so you've read the book. I mean, any of those privileges kind of like surprise you or really catch your attention as you reviewed that list?
As I was going through, because I was really trying to find one that was going to surprise me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to stump her. And I'm like, no, I can't find anyone that actually did. But there was actually one that made me pause to think about it. And I think it was number 14, where it was saying that I don't have to care for I'm not a caregiver for anyone personally. And that one made me take a pause, because I was thinking of it from a cultural perspective. For me to be able to take care of someone or to be a caregiver for someone, to me is a benefit. While it may be tiresome or there may be sacrifices that have to be made, to me, I actually kind of look at taking care of that person or being able to have the means to do that as a privilege. So that one kind of did take me like, I wonder how that could look. But then as I thought more about, sacrifices that may have to be made at work when you're having to take care of one, just this week, my kids, had to come home because they were in contact. They don't have it, COVID, but they were in contact, so the school had to quarantine them. And so it's like, okay, grandma, come to the rescue, somebody help. And so that made me think about it differently. Like, if you don't have these things to worry about, it actually helps you to be focused solely on your career, and it gives you that privilege to be able to do that where others may not have to. So, so thank you for, opening my eyes to a broader perspective as I was looking at that. And I know when you talk about privilege, you did bring out a lot of things around how multifaceted it is. And when I think about the framework that we've set at PwC around active allyship in our model. So our first step is around reflecting. Our second step is to respond. That's the call to action. And the last step is really around that engagement and making that commitment. And so that reflection piece to me is very key, because that allows you to think about the privilege or the lens of privilege that we as individuals may have in given scenarios. So thank you for sharing that. Just curious, though, I mean, you talk about tech, you talk about privilege that, the males in tech had, you talk about, how you've had to be an ally for others, but can you share a story around when someone has been an ally for you and what that looked like?
Oh, sure. I think my favorite story, and there have been so many examples of this over my career, continuing to this day, but my favorite is when I first joined Adobe as an engineering leader. I was in a very large engineering leadership meeting with all my new peers, my boss, a few other senior vice presidents as well. And I remember my boss saying, at one point during the meeting, he said, well, what I learned from Karen Catlin on this topic is the following. And he went on to summarize something I had shared with him in a one-on-one like the previous week. But what happened in that moment and why it was an act of allyship is he was highly respected, and this highly respected person, said he had learned something from me, a woman, and the new person on the team, basically. He had learned from me. It is a sign of respect. It gave me this great boost for my just personal kind of setting the imposter syndrome aside, potentially, made me feel good. But I think he helped me build credibility with my new peers. And there's no way to measure this, but I really think that helped me then reach out to some of these new peers, start some dialogue, start a connection, build my network, and start working on things together because I had that respect from my boss. So an example of how simple was that? This is what I learned from Karen. So simple, anyone can weave that into a conversation once a day, if not more often.
Exactly. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, just the amplification of your voice in and of itself and the opportunities that it presented is fabulous. So thank you for sharing that story with us. So one of the things that I get often accused of at home from my wife is that I don't take subtle hints. So I need it to be black and white. She speaks very directly to me. And so I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of go into some scenarios, because when we think about allyship, and we think about active allyship, and when we think about the definition of allyship being a verb, that means there's a call to action. And a lot of times we can share stories and have these conversations, but leave with, what do I do in this situation? So do you mind if we kind of shift in there, and then we'll come back to some of our questions and things like that? Is that
yes,
good?
I'm all about these, how do you take action? This is not just some theory thing. This is how do you show up? So yes, let's dive in.
Okay, so I will make the statement to say that some scenarios may sound like they're here at PwC, but I want to share that these scenarios are just scenarios that could happen in everyday life. So, first one, you're in a virtual meeting and you notice someone is having trouble getting a word in. Someone's always talking over them. What would you do?
Yeah, so this is, and I'm going to label it, it's the man-terruption. Even if it's not a man doing the interruptions, chances are it will be. There is research out there showing that men tend to interrupt women more than the other way around. Maybe it's because it's culturally more acceptable. Maybe it's because cisgender men have longer vocal cords, which make their voices deeper, louder. It's easier to break into a conversation. But for whatever the reason is, these interruptions, when they happen, really are not inclusive. And the person who's being interrupted kind of just keeps stepping back from the conversation. It's like, why do I even bother, right? So look out for these things because they happen a lot. Look out for these interruptions. And what you can do, and if it's a virtual meeting or in person, if you're lucky enough to do that these days, but any kind of meeting, you can point it out and just say, hey, wait a second. And I mentioned this right at the beginning of my introduction. Wait a second. I'd like to hear Joel finish his thought. Like, that's a very respectful way to redirect the conversation. Also, I think in virtual meetings, we have additional tools at our disposal to kind of take action. And another one is we could send that person who's doing all the interruptions, maybe a private chat through the web conferencing system and just say, hey, did you notice that you are interrupting a lot? Maybe in the second half of the meeting, we both should listen more and talk less. Something like that. So do it kind of in private, through that chat, but get them, they might not even be aware that they're doing it, and point it out and give other people the opportunity to speak.
No, thank you. And the one thing that points out there is you're not just paying attention to what your role is in the meeting in a way of, oh, I'm coming to present X, Y, and Z. You're now taking time to look at the entire meeting. And so therefore it makes you more aware of all things that are going on, and it takes the attention off of you and now allows you to focus on others. So thank you for that one. So let's go to this next one, because I loved how you titled this in your book around office housework or office keeping. So I'm in a meeting and I notice that the woman or the female in the meeting is, or the only woman that may be in the meeting is once again given the task of, oh, can you take these minute meetings for me, or schedule a follow-up call, or, we're having an activity, a fun event. Oh, we would love for you to plan it. Kind of shed some light on what that does and how we can, be better at delegating that work. Right.
Yeah. So this is office housework. Tasks that are necessary for the health of an organization, the health of a group, but when they're no one's job, they become these housework tasks that just need to get done. So if your job is to run meetings, maybe you're a project or program manager, and your job is to run meetings and take notes and track action items, that's fine. It's your job. It's not office housework. But when it's not your job, and people are looking around the table, virtual or in person, and they're saying like, oh, who can take these notes or track the action items or plan the follow-up meeting? Or, oh my gosh, not everyone's here. Who can ping them in Slack or has their, can text them or something to make sure that everyone gets in here? These tasks often go to women, and especially women of color. Even though they might, why? They don't have some unique power that makes it easier for them to track people down to pull them into a meeting, right? Just but we look to women, unfortunately, to do these support tasks. And the problem with this is that when women take on these tasks, they are in service to everyone else. They become subservient to their peers, to other people. And chances are they're not making the killer points they should be making in the meeting because they're kind of a step behind taking the notes or tracking those action items. So their careers suffer as a result. So if you see it, first of all, if it's an ongoing kind of meeting, a best practice is to set up a rotation saying, we're going to have this meeting monthly. We need to have a rotating list of who will take the minutes or track the action items or be the timekeeper for each of our meetings. So a rotating set of responsibilities is a perfect way to disrupt that. But if it's just sort of in the moment and someone's looking at, Sue, hey, Sue, can you figure out how we can do a fun virtual happy hour? And Sue is like, a senior business analyst and not someone who usually plans fun activities. So point it out and just say something like, who would like to do it? Get a volunteer, or better yet, if you're a man, is volunteer yourself to do it. I remember hearing from a man who, after he read my book, we ran into each other at a conference, and he said, Karen, one thing I think of you every time we have a lunch meeting, this was pre-COVID, but a lunch meeting in the office, I'm always the person who clears the pizza boxes and brings them to the kitchen afterwards, because I don't want the last woman leaving the room to feel she has to do that. So step up yourself, men, and take on some of these tasks.
That is powerful. I was actually listening to a webcast a couple days ago, and it was two cisgender men talking about the role of men as allies. And one of the things that they said, before we can even have change in the work environment, we may need to rethink about how we're doing things at home and lean in, as Sheryl Sandberg would say, and do a little more of the housework. I have my card here. I'll fold clothes and do laundry every now and then, but I definitely get it, because, when we think about those assignments and those tasks, as you said, they can have the view of someone else looking at those as more subservient in the type of role, versus than actually validating that everyone in this room should be able to pitch in and help out. So thank you for sharing that. Now, this one, I have to say, is something that resonated with me. And this is actually a conversation that I recently had. And I was and this was, after the murder of George Floyd, and we were doing candid conversations, and everyone was really around in engaging and wanting to figure out what could we do next, and how could we help. And I was in a conversation with a white male leader, and while he expressed his concern around having these conversations, and, he was really coming from a genuine place, he also shared with me that, he was concerned about now his career opportunities being limited, because the focus, quote unquote, is going to now be on more diverse talent. And to be honest, I didn't know how to. Now, I know what I wanted to say, but I didn't say it. But so give me some advice. I need some coaching. So give me some coaching on how we can have these conversations and as allies.
Okay, so I am curious about what you were tempted to say, and it may have been this, and it depends on your relationship. But if you have a relationship that can survive that real candid kind of conversation, it could be, you could respond to him like, hey, man up and get over it. Chances are you've had so many advantages your entire life because you're a white man. Now it's time for other people to have the same opportunity you've had your entire life. I mean, a little snarky, but very direct. So I would encourage people man up, like get over it kind of thing. But a way to move the conversation forward, I'd say in a more productive way, would be,
right.
Ask him to expand on his concerns. Like, how is your career being limited? Let's talk about that. What is it really? How is that manifesting itself? I want to understand that better. And then encourage him and have a dialogue around, can you think of ways to address those limitations that you're experiencing in a way that will not take opportunities away from someone else, right? So I think that I understand that it is a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. It is a mindset of my boat's going to sink while others rise with the tide. No, all boats rise with the tide. And I think that we have to have a holistic kind of view that these diversity and inclusion initiatives are good for everyone, good for our peers, good for the business, good for growth overall. The pie is going to keep expanding as we get stronger and better here. And when that pie expands, everybody's slice gets a little bit bigger.
See, that's exactly what I was going to say. Not.
Awesome.
But the get over it piece, that's where I was going to. But the way that you tied that up at the end and really around, as you're right, having that conversation, having that relationship, I'm sure that I could have had that same conversation and gotten to that same point. So thank you for that coaching. I will send me the bill, and I will definitely reimburse you for that coaching session there. All right. So hopefully these scenarios are giving you some insights onto how you could have these conversations. So let's bring it home a little bit more to our industry. So I'm in a conversation with a leader who is about to assign a tech consulting opportunity to someone they always go to versus giving it to the person who would actually benefit from this developmental opportunity and has the skills to do so? How would we handle that one?
Yeah. Oh, what you just outlined, Joel, can easily happen because most of us have homogenous networks full of people just like us. And these form because we like hanging out with people like us. We get to know them because we share some common interests or common heritage or common holidays or whatever. But we tend to build networks full of people who are just like us. And then who do we trust as we're thinking about giving plum assignments out or thinking about promoting people? The people we trust to take on this new work are the people in our networks who look just like us. So this is how this happens. Very common what you've just outlined. So I'd recommend to act as an ally is if you are witnessing that, the way you phrase the scenario is exactly what you should point out. Like, I notice you tend to always give these opportunities to Bob. I'm going to make up the name. You tend to always give these opportunities to Bob. And yeah, Bob's always great. Bob will get it done. But someone else, I don't know what to, I don't even name Mary. Mary's, relatively new to the organization. You might not know about her, but she could do this, and her career would benefit as a result. So I think pointing it out the way you did, it's very just matter of fact. And if the leader then still wants to stick with Bob, like, I don't know, Mary, I'm not gonna go there, still wants to stick with Bob, encourage them, and this is what an ally can do, encourage them to get to know Mary's work or the work of other people from underrepresented backgrounds. Encourage them to go to some project proposal where they're going to be presenting some work, or encourage them to set up a one-on-one with, or many one-on-ones with more people that they don't know, because they need to, especially a senior leader who's assigning work, they need to get to know people from underrepresented groups so that they can be giving them assignments, plum assignments that will grow careers and help the firm overall.
No, thank you for that. And I think when we think about our coaching culture here at the firm, one of the things that you said even about the office work or office housework is really around making a rotation. And so when we think about our coaches and our leaders, maybe this is another opportunity for them to make the rotation of, who did I give a project to this time? Who's next up to bat and has the skills to do it, so that they can actually be more inclusive to all of our people have the same opportunity versus just going to our homogenous network. So thank you for that. All right, here we go. We're getting deeper and deeper. I overheard a white person saying to a black person, "You were so articulate in that meeting just now." And it's on you.
Okay, yeah. Telling someone who is black that they're so articulate, it's kind of what's underlying that comment. What's underlying it is this assumption that they couldn't possibly be articulate or well-spoken or well-educated because of the color of their skin. I mean, it is offensive, and it's something I used to think was a compliment, but I since have learned it is not a compliment. It's not received that way. And in situations like this, I like to use the seek common ground and then educate approach. I had to do this not that long, a couple months ago. I was in a book club. We were reading the book Me and White Supremacy. The author is a black woman, Layla Saad, and Layla Saad has some YouTube videos that accompany her book. So this book club discussion I was in one day, we had watched one of her videos, we were talking about it, and one of my friends said, "I enjoyed watching the video. Layla is so articulate." And I'm like, oh my gosh, here it is. It's really this. So in the moment, I decided to give her feedback in private, not right in the big group. So we hung up the call, finished our book club discussion, and I reached out to her. I said, "Do you have time for a quick personal call, quick call?" So we got on the phone, and I explained to her, and again, I'm going to say seek common ground and then educate. So I said to her, I heard you say Layla was so articulate, and I used to think that that was a compliment, but I have since learned, and what I've shared at the beginning, that Black people don't necessarily take it as a compliment because it is this assumption that they couldn't possibly be articulate, well-spoken, educated. She took it well. And I think it is this approach of seeking the common ground. I used to be there too. I used to think that, but I have since learned. And then you bring someone along on the journey that you are on yourself. So hopefully that's a everyday action people can take if they hear that type of comment being made.
Okay, awesome. So it's funny, in your book, there was one thing that I've been become more aware of, and it's conferences and panels and speakers. And it is amazing how even in this time, it is still happening to where, I'm getting ready to register for a conference or I'm interested in attending a conference, but I notice all the featured speakers are white men.
Yeah. Yes.
Share some insights into that.
Yeah. All white men or all white people. Also, I'll expand on the scenario. There's actually terms for this. An all male panel or speaking lineup is called a manel. And an all-white panel or speaking lineup is called a WANL. And what happens, and again, this is based on our networks. If you're an event organizer, conference organizer, a track chair for some conference, you are reaching out to people in your network who you know, who have relevant voices, research areas, whatever it is. You're reaching out to people you know. And if you know people who are only like you, the Just Like Me networks, you're going to be reaching out to, if you're a man organizing that, you're going to be reaching out to other men typically. It's just, it happens. It's very understandable and organic how that all happens. So we have to look to disrupt it and pay attention to this. Now, you asked, like you're paying attention as you're registering for events and conferences. This is a perfect time. If you noticed one of these manels or WANLs is, as someone who's interested in attending and potentially spending money to attend, is pointed out and say, I noticed you have an all-white panel, all-male panel. That I don't think that's representative of our industry, of our field. And I'd like to understand what you're doing to introduce more diversity into the speaker lineup. Great thing to do. If you're a frequent public speaker like myself, it is also best practice to put in social media profiles, like, I will not speak on all white panels. That's what I have on LinkedIn. I have it on Twitter. And I have to remind myself when I am invited to speak on a panel to ask about who the other speakers are, because I don't want to be part of perpetuating that problem where we don't have the representation on stage that we should have.
Awesome. No, once again, just the nuggets and the information that you're giving have been, very valuable. And hopefully all of you who are listening are jotting things down. Yes, this is being recorded, so we'll be able to give this to you so you can go back, because I know it's a lot to take in. So thank you. I have one more scenario for you, and then we'll go into Q&A. And this is really around our hiring practices. So I'm on an interview team, and we're discussing one of the candidates. One person says, oh, and we've used this term a lot here, PwCers, I don't think they'd be a fit or a culture fit, or I don't think I'd want to be stuck on a long layover with them. Help us out here.
Yeah. I don't think they'd be a culture fit, or I don't think I could imagine hanging out with them in O'Hare Airport on a long layover, or I just can't imagine grabbing a beer with them after work. These statements are basically covering over some bias that they're not like me, they're not like us, they're different. And I think that we can rise above it, and we should, because we do want to bring in more diverse talent, expand our diversity in our teams because of all the benefits we realize when that happens. But what I recommend is, if you hear someone say, I don't think they'd be a culture fit, respond with, I think they'd be a culture add. They would bring something to our culture that we don't have today. And that is going to be good for the firm, for our clients, good for us. So I think they'd be a culture add.
Wow, I love that. Culture add. Oh, yeah, that's my word for the week. Nope. We're going to make him a culture add. Love it. So, Karen, these scenarios have been, very insightful, and the responses that you've given have been very thought-provoking, actionable, practical. They will make us uncomfortable as we start, because as we know, within this work of allyship, there is going to be a level of comfort and uncomfortability. Let me put it that way. As we do this, I think one of the quotes in your book, as I'm reading it here, it says, "The best allies are willing to make mistakes and keep trying. They acknowledge when they're wrong or could do better and correct their course. They resist getting defensive and insisting that they are already doing enough. They listen and learn. They iterate." And I think that says it all. So thank you for giving us these scenarios. And it's amazing. We do have some questions that have come in. I think they're going to be some really thought-provoking questions, but the questions that are probably on everyone's mind. But I'm sure now with you here, we can get the answers to these questions. So the first question that came in is, how do you respond to people who point out that there are many poor white people who can't possibly be privileged given their circumstances, and thereby the term white privilege is offensive to them? I hear this from someone very close to me, and I do my best to explain it in a way that I can, but I am wondering, how do you respond to that?
Yeah. So we white people navigate the world, navigate our communities, navigate professional lives in a way that it is privilege. We, regardless of our economic status, poor white people, rich white people, we don't have the same challenges navigating as the world as Black people. And that, unfortunately, is just based on how we have treated people with darker skin in our culture, in America, and in other places around the world too. We've introduced this weird notion of race as being something that means that someone is of a lower status than someone else. And so the way I try to myself understand this, because I'm white and I'm trying to understand, like, how does this impact me, or has impacted me over the years? Frankly, the tailwinds I've had because I'm white versus the headwinds that someone who is Black has had is very different. And so I try to read a lot of material by Black authors. I try to follow Black people, influencers on social media. I try to pay attention to what they're saying so I can listen and learn from that experience. And so I encourage other people to do the same. It's a tough conversation. I don't mean to be sort of sweeping it under the rug. It's a tough conversation. But just because we might be a poor white person doesn't mean that we haven't had so much opportunity and privilege that just our Black co-patriots have not had.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Citizens.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that response, and you're right. It is, a tough conversation to have, and sometimes can be situational depending on who you're speaking with, and how they receive. So, is there a right answer or a wrong answer on how you have this conversation? No, it's really around, like I think you said it earlier, around starting at that common ground. And I think when we just understand the term privilege in its purest definition, then that could help us elevate into, more of the conversation around white privilege. So when I think about even myself, which is going to kind of lead into the next question, when I think about the privilege that I have as an able-bodied person, from those that are disabled, can we touch on physical disability? Here's the question. For example, due to mobility limitations, it may take a disabled person much longer to get the task done, or it may have to spend more time at work. How can we become better allies or more sensitive to that?
Yeah. With this situation, or frankly with any situation, maybe a single mom right now working from home and homeschooling kids at the same time and trying to supervise distance learning, not to compare that completely to being disabled and potentially having mobility issues. But just like there are many things that we individually may not have firsthand experience with, but we can be empathetic and we can reach out and ask someone, is there anything the firm can be doing to support you right now? What kind of support do you need that you're not getting? So actually having that conversation and not making assumptions. I think many of us shy away. Like, I don't want to make it obvious that I see that they're walking with a cane or in a wheelchair. I'm just going to ignore that. but really it does impact how they navigate the world, navigate life. And so I think saying something like, is there any accommodations you need, anything that I can be doing to support you in delivering on this work item? So asking questions, not making assumptions, I think that's the first step. Awesome.
So I want to take us back to the articulate conversation that we were having earlier. And so the question has come in now, what if a person, if the person giving what they think is a compliment would say the same thing to a white person, does that change things, or should we just stay away from that compliment altogether?
Yeah, stay away from it altogether. Look for another way to compliment based on context. Wow, you are the best at presenting complex technical information to an audience. Okay, that's complimenting with context and so much better. Look for that as opposed to this weird, adjective that is all about it's so rooted in bias. Yeah.
Yeah, totally understood. Thank you. So stay away from it and rephrase it and add context. Got it. Love it. Okay, so another question. If you are on the receiving end of a man-terruption, how do you react to it, especially if the person that is man-terrupting outranks you or there is no one else there to speak up for you?
Yeah, I really want allies in the room to speak up. That's when we advocate for ourselves in the moment like that, we can come across as angry, as the B word, I'm not going to say it, but we can come across as all these negative adjectives, too forceful, too forthright, all sorts of things that are, and we're just trying to point out, hey, we were speaking. So ideally, there is going to be someone in the room who will be looking out for it and advocating. That's my advice. That's my work is how can an ally take action? But I know that's not always possible. And leveraging the back channel, again, I think is a really good approach. The back channel in terms of get someone else in the room who might have the equal status to the person who's interrupting you. Get, back channel them and say, hey, did you notice that, Will keeps interrupting me? Can you say something for me? I think that's a fine approach and basically to enlist an ally in the moment.
Okay, enlisting an ally. We may have to come back to that one. So allyship, as I've been, like I said, doing research, there are different phases of allyship. You have a person that's disengaged. You have one that is an ally for all, that's about social justice. But then there's this term that I've heard around performative allyship. So how can we check ourselves to stay authentic and make the conversation about others and not about ourselves? So when we think about that performative allyship.
Yeah. So performative allyship is making it all about yourself. I'm such a good person because I am doing X, Y, or Z. And the thing is, you want to be behind the scenes. You do. You want to be shining the spotlight of sorts on the person who is from an underrepresented group, helping them be successful in their career without making it all about yourself. And I'll share, this is sort of hard to admit, but I will share that there are some things I will do as an ally, such as recommending a person of color for a speaking engagement instead of me. Like, I get invitations to speak at Black History Month, and I'm like, yeah, I can do that, but why don't would you be open to some introductions to people who are Black, who would be better speakers in the moment? So I do that a lot. And here I am, probably a little bit of performative. Like, I am sharing with all of you that this is something I do. However, on social media, I'm not out there saying, hey, I am so awesome, I just recommended this person. Like, I'm not going to be bragging about it. I'm not going to be making it all about myself. I'm sharing it here today to show you that it's tempting to do that, because then I get some little cookies and stuff, like, the virtual cookies. But there are no ally cookies. Don't be looking for the ally cookies. Look to just be opening career doors, creating more opportunity for people who are from underrepresented groups. That's what you want to be doing, and stay behind the scenes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. As I've been reading and, like I said, doing some of the research around this, it's really around, and I've heard a number of people say that, allyship is not a label that we put on ourselves. It's, once that group decides that you have become an ally or done what needs to be done, that underrepresented group or, population should be the one that says, hey, this person has really acted as an ally for me, versus, oh, I'm an ally, hear me roar.
and give me the cookie and the badge.
Give me the cookie, right?
My LinkedIn profile to say my job title, comma, ally. No, don't do any of that, right?
Exactly. So one of the things that, when I read your intro or your bio was talking about, around making women stronger leaders. And so a question that's come in around the whole back channel that we've talked about. The question is, when you are taking the back channel, do you come across as weak? Shouldn't you be able to speak up and fight for yourself without coming across in a negative way?
I wondered if someone would ask. Yeah, so I think you have to decide in the moment what based on your reputation with that group, the people in the room, how you think you can do that in a way that's genuine to you to make your point made and all of that. I don't want to tell women never speak up for yourself. It's just that if it is, a very senior, like a senior partner, and you are, 2 years out of college and stuff, be aware of the dynamics at play and understand if it isn't time to help, to enlist one of those allies. The approach I recommend, though, is in the moment, don't look to make the other person look bad. The person who is interrupting you, don't try to blame them, shame them or anything, but
right.
Be factual and try to speak up and say, I have more relevant data to present on this topic. Let me go, kind of thing.
I like to use the phrase that I use with my kids, that situational awareness. Sometimes you just have to kind of, phrase it, understand the situation, know what battles you want to fight, and, because sometimes you can come across doing more harm in a way than you could actually be doing good for yourself. And so it's a matter of looking at the longer term goals. So, that back channel is definitely a good way to go about. One more question, and I have two final questions. We have about 5 minutes left. How do you respond to someone that tells you are not assertive because you are too nice, and that you can't sell because you are too nice, and does not see the skill in you because it is the skill that you are born with, being too nice?
So I'd recommend for more details. When does that show up? What does it look like? That's kind of a vague label someone's giving you. You're too nice. Tell me examples of when I've done this and what it would look like if I did it differently. So probe a little bit, get curious. I learned a phrase last week from someone. I was attending a webinar and they said, get curious, not furious with anything. When people are pointing something out about you, about your privilege, about the way you're showing up, about feedback, about your performance, get curious instead of furious. So, yeah.
Love it. Love it. All right, Karen. So we're coming to the home stretch, and this event was hosted by our Women in Technology group. So I'm going to put it out there. And of course, within technology, this group is there. And one of the initiatives that I know that they are passionate about starting is really around male allyship. What does this look like? What does it look like when allies, and particularly men, lean into women's advancement, and how can and should men help influence their male peers?
Yeah. Let's think about it in terms of sponsorship. Sponsorship in turn, not like a big sponsor program, like a partner gets, is assigned to sponsor someone who's up and coming, but more like the everyday acts of sponsorship. One is, look to recommend women for those plum assignments, for those speaking opportunities, for things that are the rocket booster fuel for a career, right? So if you don't know women to recommend for those opportunities, start to get to know women across the organization. Another thing, endorse them publicly, like my boss did when I first joined Adobe. What I learned from Karen is look for opportunities to give people shout outs about their work, about their expertise, about the impact they're having for the clients that you serve. Another thing you can do is make sure you're getting to know their work so that you can speak their name when they're not even in the room. Those meetings where things are being discussed about promotions, calibration of talent. Make sure that you are learning about the work that women are doing, on your team, in your group, so that you can speak their name when they're not around. These things just think of like, how can I be opening career doors more than I'm doing today for women? And of course, my message is for anyone from an underrepresented group, but I shout out to the Women in Tech group sponsoring this.
Definitely. So it's that sponsorship, providing those opportunities where, that the woman's voice can be heard, or giving up your seat in order to be able to give someone else that opportunity. And I love making sure that you're speaking about that person when they are not in the room. And so when we think about the responsibility of men, don't want to leave the women out of this either. So what is the responsibility of women in this collaboration with our allies? What can women do to help men engage more and build more reciprocity?
Yeah. Women, men, and anyone who, it's hard for us to experience and really understand someone else's experience because we haven't experienced that. And so that might be for a white person really not to understand how Black people navigate the world. For a man, it might be hard for understand, like, why is it hard for you to do this at work? So I think for women, being clear about here are the experiences, but men, you need to listen and believe those experiences, even if you haven't witnessed it yourself, if you haven't been in those shoes. So I'm going to put it back on the men. Men, ask the questions like, how's it going? What is it like? What are the challenges you're facing? And really believe it that when the women tell you what's happening.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Karen, this has been an amazing experience and an engaging experience. If there was one thing that you wanted to leave with those on this call today, what would that be?
Oh, yeah. So being an ally is a journey. It's a key part of the message of my book. It's a journey. No one is born an ally. No one is done being an ally. We can all keep learning and growing as allies. And so it's a journey I'm on myself. I hope more people are going to be joining me. And I'll just share, I have a free weekly newsletter called 5 Ally Actions. I send it out on Fridays. It's what I've learned during the course of the week about how to be a better ally. And so consider subscribing to that if you would like some ongoing inspiration, ideas, suggestions about how you can be a better ally. You can find that at betterallies.com.
Thank you, Karen, and we'll definitely send that out in the follow-up notes, but thank you for allowing us to come along this journey with you. To all of you who have joined us today, thank you for being such a lovely and engaging audience. Remember, this is my takeaway, and I'm going to steal it and give credit to Karen this one time, but then I'm going to take it, get curious and not furious. Thank you for joining us today for Allyship in Action, and we look forward to seeing you on this journey. Goodbye.
Bye.